Today is Tuesday, July 14th, yet again, my friends. Rob here hopping on with a speaker for the month from the Get in the Car meeting here in Tennessee. From the Tennessee group, I want to thank Heather and Jan and my sponsor and everybody else that's involved in getting this meeting. And of course, our speaker today, her name is Kenna F, for this powerful message you're about to hear. There were so many nuggets of wisdom that I remember right off the bat. I got to go to this one. And she's a teacher. She has over 40 years of sobriety. And she was a teacher in a middle school. So it's a lady after my own heart here. And she had so many great quotes like, bring the body and the mind will follow. Being prepared to be divinely inconvenienced in life. Experience over theory. That a lot of the advice we hear is experience rather than theory. We've lived it, right? And then one of my favorites. Let's take the stones we stumble over and build an altar. Beautiful stuff. So I hope you all enjoy this one. This is, again, Kenna F, 40 years of sobriety, and you're in for a treat. And I can't wait to re-listen to it myself. So I'm going to get out of the way. I hope you all have a great one, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.
Here's our AA speaker tonight. She's traveled all the way from sunny southern Los Angeles. So tonight, I'd like to welcome Kenna F.
Hi, I'm Kenna Fukuyama, and I'm an alcoholic. 40 years sober. I still don't like things in my peripheral vision. Can I lower this mic? You remember that? Like, oh, what was that? Okay, so if you're new, it's really here, this microphone. Okay, I have all my tricks. That's my clock. Too much water, I'm afraid, but I had a very spicy dinner, and I drank about 2 gallons of water, so we'll see how that goes. But there's 2 really good nurses here, and if I need a catheter, I think they'll be able to help me out. Thank you for the invitation. It's been really lovely. Life is definitely in session, and it is full and rich, and my heart is really, really full. And I don't have any bad news about my life in Alcoholics Anonymous. That being said, it doesn't mean I came here 40 years ago and worked the 12 golden steps and moved into Snow White's cottage and never had another bad day, right? But you never promised me that either. I mean, I've had good times and bad times. And what you promised me is that I would find a design for living that works under all conditions. And that's been my experience. And for anyone who's new, that's what we have here. What we have here is experiential. It's not theory. I'm going to tell you what happened to me. And I think our stories are such powerful things. When you're telling me your story, there's nothing for me to argue about. There's nothing for me to put my fists up or point out why you're wrong. You're just telling me what happened to you. And oftentimes I find myself in that, right? And I have bet my life on what goes on here. And it's paid off really, really well for me. And I just, when I made that first call that found me to you from a payphone or liquor store, and I'll get into that later, I had nobody to call. I called my boss at the bar I worked at. I didn't have anybody to call. And tonight, just this one night, I have, so many friends here. Jack and Leslie came from Chattanooga. Thank you so much. Jack is a dear Alaman friend, and I've known he and Leslie for a long time. He's an old stunt man and a picture car guy, kind of last of his breed, those old Hollywood guys that, he's got some great stories. The people that I've met along the way here, it's just such a really, really good life. And I want to thank Joby and Mike and Giselle for looking out for me so well and hosting me. And we have, a long history with people, a long history. And Laura and Cheryl, who came I could go on, and John and Lisa and Mitch. And, and we live our lives out loud with one another, right? I invite you to stay if you're new, and I invite you to avail yourself of what is here. And one of the things that has served me really well is being an active member of an active home group. And as a result of that, and this is a great one, my life is, I haven't been just able to stay sober, but I've been able to have, a really, really good life. And I love you so much, Heather. Heather, who, when I bought my first house, thanks to Joby, came and laid shelf paper down and scraped up, all kinds of things and left me meals, and it's a good life. I was thinking, when I was new, I went to central office. I got sober in Honolulu to buy a big book, and I could have gotten it at a meeting, but I wanted to go to the headquarters, and just when they were asking for the people in their first 30 days, and I said, I'd like to buy a big book, and they said, are you new? And I said, no, I have 17 days. And, that's funny now, but that's a long time between cocktails. It was impossible, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this incredible thing that I've been given, this gift, I'm one of those people that the obsession was just taken right out of me. Now, I can't write on that. I've had to do a lot of things over the years to keep that obsession at bay. But I did get that great gift. And I hope I never stop being impressed by Alcoholics Anonymous, And the view from here is just fantastic. We should not laugh this way or, look this way or be able to home bake things. When I got here tonight, like every meeting, the lights were on, the chairs were set up, the coffee was made. There was someone there to welcome me. I was invited here, I don't know, a year ago or something, and Joby said she'd be here, and I said I'd be here, and we were both here. If that's not A working, I don't know what is, right? And A is not, it's not, again, if you're new, not just working, not going to work on some other plane or some other time or some other place, here and now. Right here, right now, right? I am looking out at the risen dead. It's quite impossible if you have alcoholism. But here we are, resurrected, I used to drink, obviously. I was born, I'll start there. I was born in Santa Cruz on the Monterey Bay, Northern California, kind of near San Francisco, and beautiful place to grow up. And my mom's side of the family was all from there, been there a long time, and lovely place. My family is still all there, but there was alcoholism in my family, and so that meant, and it wasn't like, I just retired from teaching public school in LA County, and so my perceptions of an unhappy childhood have altered considerably, but it was like our phone would often be cut off or the lights would be cut off, lots of broken windows. Sometimes, I remember one time the glass man had been there for like the third time in a week fixing a broken window, and he said to my mom, "Lady, you're the captain of a strange ship." And that was kind of life at our house. And sometimes there'd be violence. My dad would be gone for long stretches of time, and then he'd show up, and he'd be all beat up, or sometimes, him and his drunken friends, it would be a lot of fun, and you just kind of never knew what you were going to get, right? Like our Christmas lights were up all year, right? Our garbage cans were out all week, kind of that. We always had these different, like, $200 station wagons with a coat hanger antenna, and I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my dad moved out when I was about 10 or so. He didn't go far. He went down the street, moved in with another woman and her kids, and left my mom, the librarian, with these 4 children to raise. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, was sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had gotten sober where he was from, way up in Humboldt County, and in the 40s. And I don't know how AA got behind the redwood curtain when it was barely even a decade old, but somebody carried the message to my grandfather. And that's to this day a pretty isolated place, but AA was there. And in his way, my grandfather carried the message to me. Even though I was 14 when he passed away, I was just starting to drink, but when my dad left, it was my grandfather who put braces on my teeth and paid the tuition at the Catholic school that we went to and helped my mom make the house payments, and so she didn't lose that house. And had he not been sober, things would have been quite different, I'm sure, right? And so A was working in my life before I even knew that I needed you and before I ever even drank. And so my debt to Alcoholics Anonymous is enormous, and I am so grateful for it. And that Catholic school that I went to, I loved Catholic school. I don't think I'm recovering from that experience. And, and I recognize many people had horrific experiences, truly. And I happen to have a very good one. The priests and the nuns were good examples of love and service. I had a really good connection with that faith that I was introduced to there, and that God that I was introduced to there. And it was the very ground that I stood on, because things were unstable at home. You never knew but I love putting on that uniform. I love that structure. I love the ritual of the Catholic Mass. It spoke to me, and it gave me a place to stand. There's an Irish phrase, how does it go? You are the place where I stand on the day when my feet are sore from walking. And it gave me that place to stand. And I mention that because that was whatever is nearest and dearest to you, alcoholism is going to demand that from you. And for me, it demanded my faith and that connection with that God. When I graduated from the 8th grade, unfortunately, the Catholic high school had closed. And so I was on my way to public school. And the morning after my 8th grade graduation, I've been really active in that school and that parish. And my mom was at the kitchen table. She had my diploma. And I'd won some little pins, and I think I mentioned I'm the youngest of those 4 kids. And she said to me, "Ken, I finally got my scholar." And she had gone to that school for 13 years, and her mother and her grandmother. So I was the 4th generation to graduate from there. And about a year and a half later, maybe 2 years, I'm in front of my mom again, and things are a little different because I'd started to drink. And now I'm behind the counter at the Wiener Schnitzel, selling hot dogs. And my mom had showed up there because I hadn't been home the night before, and that was to become a common thing for me. And she was standing there and trying not to cry and saying, "I don't understand what has happened to you. You used to be so active." And she meant in our parish. But I'm an alcoholic, and alcohol fixes something in me that I need fixing, as Mary Ann King says. I didn't know I was defending my right to drink. I can see it now. But, I said to my mom, because I can't stand to see that look on your face, right? I know what it's doing to you, but what it does for me is far greater. And, said to my mom, "Get out of here, leave me alone, you don't care." Just anything to make her go away, right? Because I know I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And indeed I did. I had taken my first geographic, maybe sometime before that. And I had gone over to Honolulu. It seemed like my friends could just party on the weekends and end up back at school. And I thought, you know what, it's the problem at Santa Cruz. It's this town. If I, go somewhere where I don't know, and I didn't know I was taking a geographical course, but if I go where I don't know anybody, then I'll go to school every day. I wanted to do the right thing. I didn't want to be unlearned. I didn't want to, but again, I'm an alcoholic, and my older sister was living in Honolulu. She's 6 years older than me, so she was about 18, 19. She also is an alcoholic, is sober today, but was not at that time. And she had a baby, was raising this baby on her own, and was on welfare, and was living over in Honolulu and, drinking. And I thought, okay, I'll go move in with my sister, and I did that. I moved in with her and enrolled in a high school, and I know that I went the first day to all my classes, but after that, it seemed like the same people that were at Santa Cruz High were at Kaiser High in Honolulu, and I'm off and running again. And we ended up losing our apartment and stayed on friends' couches and stuff. And what I remember about that is that nobody was ever happy to see us coming. These 2 teenage girls and a baby and some food stamps, And I remember the Easter Sunday of that year, getting off a city bus. I was going to stay with someone. I don't remember. I was by myself. I had all my belongings in a pillowcase, and my eye caught that pillowcase. And I remember thinking, just for a flash, right? Just a flash, just something's wrong here. Something's not right. It's Easter Sunday. I should have been at Mass. I should be with my family. but I was just getting going. And, now, of course, I'm not going to school because I don't even know where I'm sleeping that night. And eventually we did find an apartment. But now I'm pregnant, and I terminated that pregnancy, and I'm not here to moralize about that for anybody, but it had been maybe a year before that I'd been confirmed in the Catholic Church, and that faith that mattered to me, and that was a line I was not going to cross, and a principle I was not going to break. And now I'm a bad girl, and I've done an unfixable thing. And what do you do with that? You drink, right? You continue to drink. And I realized the problem, though, was Honolulu. If I'd never gone there, none of this ever would have happened. I'm going to go back to California. It'll all be different. And tried to go back to high school one last time and made it to about Halloween, and then started my restaurant career there at the Winter Schnitzel. And, I didn't know when I took that job I was going to do that work for the next 17 years. And the first 11 years of my sobriety, nothing wrong with that. But I was never happy doing it, right? I was always waiting for my real life to start. And man, and there's people in this room that know exactly what I'm talking about, because we, come from an area and a group where there's, a really strong sponsorship ethic, and people are more interested in my maturation and our common welfare than in how I feel about something in the moment, right? But I'm so grateful for sponsors and mentors and old timers that insisted I know the difference between a fantasy and a plan, and that have held the bar for me just a little bit higher than I thought that I could reach, because I've risen to their level of expectation, because I won't even get out of bed, I won't. And I love the life I have, but many times, sorry to say, even 40 years sober, my alarm goes off, and I'm not like, oh, good, it's a new opportunity, to walk hand in hand with my Creator. Usually my response is like, damn it. And then I think, what can I call in sick for, and when is my next nap? And which is why, and it was, they mentioned about tonight a commitment, and why to this day I have regular meetings on regular meeting nights, and I have commitments at those meetings. And that's because when my head, I got to have that smart feet. When my head says, my God, you teach special ed middle school, stay home and make amends to yourself, my feet are moving. No, I've got to light those candles. I've got to pass that basket, because I forget how much I need you and how much I like being here until I get here. It's the old, bring the body and the mind will follow. Because it's never a good idea for me to go to a meeting. It just isn't until I'm actually here. And then my heart fills up and my alcoholism, is treated. And so these are the things that I have to put in place to counteract my alcoholism. So I've jumped around. But anyway, I worked at the Winter Schnitzel. I lost that job, which is possible. And that's for another evening. But I showed them, I went and got a job at the Greater American Wiener Works on the other side of town, and that place served beer, and now I'm stealing beer from them, and that really felt like a vertical move, like, oh my God, like beer? I wasn't even 18, I don't know how, anyway, I think I wasn't supposed to serve it, but I sure could drink it. Anyway, I'm dating, start dating this guy, and our first date was a double date, and it was my best friend Pam and I. We both worked at the Winter Schnitzel together. And both of those guys are dead. Neither of them made it to 50. Pam, when I got sober in 85, was strung out and living in a pickup truck and sneaking into UCSC to shower. And I think back just on that night alone, right? Just those 4 teenagers, and how incredibly fortunate I am to be here in Knoxville, right? If I ever think that, astoundingly, A seems inconvenient more often than I'd like to admit, right? I hope A never gets in the way of the good life that it's given me, because sometimes it appears, right, that divine inconvenience, as Larry Thomas used to talk about. But anyway, I went over to the Great American Wiener Works, and that was a mom and pop place, and I'm stealing from them. Many years later, I was able to make an amends for that, but that relationship with that guy is getting crazy and violent, and I can't tell people what's going on there, and I don't know how to get out of that. And I bought a car around this time, but like everything, ready, fire, aim, right? No driver's license, no registration, no insurance. I didn't know how to drive, actually. I found the car in the newspaper, got somebody to give me a ride, eventually learned. But it was a stick shift and it had a choke. Jack, you can appreciate, that's a lot of motor skills, right? And an overdrive switch. But eventually I learned how to drive. But, that car became like this metaphor for my drinking. By the time it was done, I had lost the handle for the window, so I had to hold the window up with a book of matches. But eventually you need the matches. And I remember the day the window clunked down and shattered. And I thought, oh, thank God, I don't have to share my matches with the window. And it can be kind of cold and rainy up in Northern California, and I'm, no window, and I broke the tie rod, something you're supposed to, I don't know, I flew off a curb and whatever that is, and the brake lights went out, and I remember my brother saying, that's dangerous, but eventually so did the brakes, and I had this whole routine of downshifting and pumping the brakes and using the emergency brake and putting my foot out the door, and it's no wonder we're so tired when we get here, right? And I don't know, things are just, and people were starting to die around me and things were kind of closing in, and I had that sense. I had a particularly bad week. I'd been beaten up by this guy. He found me in somebody else's house, dragged me out of there, and that had been going on for a while, and then within a few days I came to, and I had that weight on my chest. The blackouts aren't so cute anymore, and I can't even tell my drinking friends, like, hey, what happened last night, ha ha ha, because I don't even want them to know how out of control I am. And this particular morning, it was unusual that I woke up that early, but I knew it hadn't been a good night, and it had something to do with my car, and my car was in my mom's garage. I never parked it there, but there were pieces missing off it, which I've never found, and I found myself picking up the morning newspaper. Had he hit anyone or killed anyone? And I borrowed my mom's car, and I'm driving back around town looking for those pieces, which I never found, because most of that night was in a blackout, and suddenly Hawaii didn't look so bad after all, and I didn't tell that guy where I was going. I left that car in my mom's garage, and I went back to Honolulu. I just turned 18. I got a job as a cocktail waitress in a bar, and I'm making great money for an 18-year-old high school dropout, and I'm drinking in the bars now, but I'm just crossing those lines, and by the time I'm 19, I'm on my 4th abortion, and how has that happened? And I assure you, I never planned on living that way, and now I don't see any way. It is a dead end and a murky bog. There is no way I can redeem what my life has become. And I know those words and concepts, grace, reconciliation, redemption, mercy, but they cannot be for me. They absolutely cannot be for me, right? It's like you're cast out of Eden. There is no going back. And I could not turn in that direction of a God that had given me such a comfort. I think that, you know how bright the light is in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I mean the light. And it's because we all come out of these, our own individual, I think, all our different particular individual hells and different ways that we've wandered in darkness. And, we come here and it's light and bright and safe. I mentioned Marianne earlier, fine member of the class in 1969, very active member and well-loved member of our home group. And she sponsored this woman who one night, who came to her and was like, Marianne, there's this feeling that I get when I'm here, and I don't know what it is. I can't describe it. And you know how you're new, you're waking up to feelings. And Marianne said, why don't you call it safe? And I think that's a great 4-letter word for Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, not theory. That's been my experience. Anyway, I'm in Honolulu, like I said, wandering in that darkness. And we have that phrase here, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. It's a mouthful. And I don't think anyone ever in the history of AA has said to their sponsor, what does that mean? That one just lands, right? There's a shorter word for it, Catholic word perdition, spiritual ruin, loss of the soul. And that last couple of years of my drinking, I spent in that state of spiritual ruin, just wandering in that darkness. And I cannot turn in the direction of that God that had given me such comfort, that was the very ground that I stood on. There is no going back there. There's no off-ramps. And I am now drinking in the strip bars in Honolulu. I worked in Waikiki. We'd go to each other's clubs, comp each other's tabs. I can't predict my behavior anymore. I don't, and I might go into a blackout and get robbed. I might, a doorman might put me in a taxi cab because I'm falling down. I have a huge capacity for alcohol, but now I'm just having maybe 2 or 3 drinks and I'm stumbling and slurring my words. My mind is staying sober, but my body is getting drunk very quickly. And I could go to those strip bars and look at the women on stage. Plus they're open till 4 a.m. They reopen at 6 a.m. And I could think, well, at least I'm not doing that. And there were, some of us seek out sordid places, as our literature tells us. And I could be there. No one's going to ask me to dance or have a conversation. I'm there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to drink. And I'm living in an apartment that was a lot like the house I grew up in, and I was never going to live like that. It was between the Honolulu City bus yard and the Kenau Street freeway off-ramp and this cinder block building. It was my alcoholic sister and, unfortunately, my nephew, who was 6 years old at the time, who's about 18 years sober now. And I'm renting out my bedroom, easily made rent in a night or two in tips, but the money's going over other places. And I'm renting out my bedroom and living on the living room floor of that apartment. And there was louvered windows, and the bottom 4 or 5 were broken out, and these feral cats that lived in the city bus yard, they'd come through those windows and eat out of the trash and spray all over. And there's this wet spot. Apparently we had a plumbing problem, and that was a little more than I could handle. And, today I might have to call Laura or call my sponsor and say, hey, I'm going to call the plumber and call you back and tell you I did it. Now, I don't know why I'm afraid to call a plumber, but I know you understand it, and no one's going to question that. Say, yep, call me back. That kind of accountability that I have with sponsors and members of my home group that understand my alcoholism, right? Not to plug Joby's business, I'm not at all, but I want someone who understands when they're doing a mortgage for me, before I even started, I'm already in foreclosure, right? And I don't have to hide that. Right? We understand. I can't share this in the faculty lounge, I assure you. Anyway, this wet spot, and I just got bigger at jumping over it as it got bigger, and my payphone is now the payphone is the liquor store that I mentioned, because my phone's been cut off, and I easily made rent and utilities and stuff in a couple nights and tips, but the money's going other places. And I'm now about 85 pounds, and my hair's falling out, my gums are receded from malnutrition, and all that stuff that happens to us in end-stage alcoholism is happening to me. I'm vomiting liver bile and hearing voices and things crawling on my skin, and I'm waking up, in like a full-throated scream, and I'm sure there's somebody under my bed or out of my lanai. And my married boyfriend, I forgot about him. There was these Elvis impersonators at the bar I worked at, and 2 of them, an afternoon one and a night one. I was not with an Elvis. I was with one of the Elvis's bass players. Way cooler, but there was a fly in the ointment. He was married. So he obviously, we can't go to his house. He started not want to come around because of the way that I lived. And I just thought he was paranoid, always on me about something. And he came over this afternoon and had stitches on my ankle because stuff happens. And I'm stumbling around. He said, look at your ankle. And it was just covered with fleas. And I always share that when I'm asked to speak in case I ever think there's any glamour left in the cocktail for me. That is the 22-year-old, 85-pound young woman who came to you in 1985, and you have given her an extraordinary life. This day came for me, typical day, racing brain. Bill describes it so well, right? When he uses words like calamity or quicksand stretched all around me. And I just couldn't get it right. Typical day, vomiting liver bile, a bottle of vodka in the freezer. I'm trying to keep that down. And I just couldn't, I couldn't calm down the whips and jangles, and as my dad used to call them. And I started to pray. I had not been able to do that in a long time. And I had a rosary in one hand and the vodka in the other. And I think that there's a old timer, he's passed away now in the LA area, Don Norman, and he talked about, his first day of sobriety, which is, that's not a good day, but you don't know that. I mean, you don't know it's actually a great day. And isn't it interesting, too, that I always think about that when we do, like chips. I was at the meeting here last night and giving chips and birthday cakes. And, where else do you count the days and the months and the years since you were given a gift, right? Except in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, anyway, I think that praying led me to the payphone at the liquor store. I didn't really have anybody to call. I love that in the doctor's opinion, just thinking about that apartment and that plumbing problem and how, Dr. Silkworth writes that the alcoholic's problems pile up on him and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And we can, the lives that we live would kill a normie in a hot minute, right? Thrown out of moving cars, penitentiary, all this crazy stuff, but call a plumber, oh God, open my mail. We're interesting people. But anyway, I'm at the payphone at the liquor store. I had nobody in my life to call. As I said, and I called my boss at the bar, and he came over and took a look at me, and I was sick and shaking, and he said, you need a drink, let's go get a drink. And I said, no, take me to the hospital. And I don't know where that came from, but that's what came out, and that's what he did. And I saw a nurse before I saw a doctor, and I said to her, I can probably stop the cocaine, but I can't stop drinking. Step one, admission of complete defeat. I didn't know anything about step one, but I had just taken it, and I felt this little shift. I said that out loud to another human being, I can't stop drinking. And she said, my boyfriend's an alcoholic and he goes to AA. And I remember thinking, that's a little extreme, hold on. And then I saw a doctor, and I'm waiting for the sympathy and the Valium, and I didn't get either one of those things. He said, you're an alcoholic and we can't help you, and good luck and goodbye. And he sent me on my way with a piece of paper. I wish I would have kept it. And it had central office and, treatment centers and stuff like that. And I remember going to the payphone at the liquor store and making some calls, and a woman said to me, we don't have a bed, but we go to this place tonight. And it turned out it was an AA meeting at the Salvation Army Detox up on the Poly Highway. And I didn't even know, my memory is I didn't know that. She just said, go to this place. And that's what I did. Now, why would I do that? It makes no sense. Some random voice on the end of a payphone. There's only one time you can, when you're in a state of complete surrender, and I was willing to try it somebody else's way. And I tell you, so much good in my life has come when I've been willing to try it somebody else's way. Not just that day, but all of these days since. And I walked in, and it was this AA meeting. I walked in there, and I don't know how else to describe it except that I knew I'd stepped into the light. I knew that you suffered from what I suffered from, and I could see you were free men and women. I believed you from day one, and I kept coming. And I got that great gift of having the obsession removed, and I knew I was living in some kind of state of grace. Things were different. And I got involved. I got a home group, the Steps to Freedom group. We met on Tuesday nights, and I got a sponsor, and I got swept up with a group of AA active people, and thank God, and they absolutely saved my life, and started following them around, and because I got this great gift of having the obsession removed, it became easier I knew I wasn't doing that. That was grace. That was that unearned gift of grace. And so I was able to turn in a direction of a God of my understanding. I could turn to that again. And what a great gift that was, right? And so those first 3 steps were very doable for me. Although, third step, does that mean I'm going to have to join Mother Teresa's order and clean the wounds of lepers? But God reserves those jobs for the more spiritually fit, I've discovered. And did that first inventory, which terrified me, but it was then that I really felt like a member in good standing of AA, that I was really one of you. When I you could start to look me in the eye. And when I had about 3 years of sobriety, I moved to the LA area where I still am. And the old timers in Honolulu said, it's a big fellowship. You should go get a home group and, get hooked in. It's true. There's 4,000 meetings a week in the greater LA area. And, you could kind of fall through the cracks there. And I thought that was good advice, but I didn't take it. I wasn't being willful, but I very quickly forgot that I'm supposed to listen for the similarities and not the differences. And, wherever you get sober, that's A for you. And so it was different in LA than Honolulu. Of course, now I think LA does it right and Honolulu does it wrong, right? But there is no wrong. And the problem with looking for the differences is, the more I look, the more there are. And that space between you and I is getting wider and wider. And I'm getting closer and closer to that door, and I don't even know it's happening. And I got in trouble. And what that looked like for me, didn't have a sponsor, didn't have a home group for about a year and a half, just going to meetings when the heat was on. And I'm dating a heroin dealer that I met in a park and receiving stolen property from him and taking his collect calls in the county jail. And I knew I was in a lot of trouble. And I was waiting tables with Mary Ann King that I mentioned. And I knew she was an active member of an active home group. And I kind of turned myself into her. And she said, there's a little meeting I go to on Monday nights. Why don't you come? And, she didn't say Wednesday, right? The Wednesday meeting with 1,000 people. She said, why don't you come on Monday? And thank God that when Monday came around, I didn't have a better idea. That one more time I'd been beaten into a state of reasonableness. Because when your life is what I just described, the heroin dealer, et cetera, and somebody says, why don't you come to a meeting? You think, a meeting? That's your puny little solution, really, a meeting? But yeah, actually, that's the start of it. And I followed her to that meeting, and Laura and I go to that meeting to this day. We're back in the kitchen together and sat down next to Mary Ann. She said, start looking around for a sponsor. And I was in no position to interview. Somebody just said, ask her. And I asked, that was Karen Garrison. Some of you remember Karen, and she absolutely saved my life. And the first thing she said to me was, honey, I expect a lot from the people I sponsor. And I appreciated her. Again, she was less interested in my feelings in the moment than my recovery from alcoholism. And she said, with your amount of sobriety, I think she said, go to 4 meetings a week and get commitments at those meetings, get an H&I panel, hospitals, institutions. We're going to go through the steps again. Answer phones to central office. I want you to get involved with the other women I sponsor, your A sisters, and you're going to call me on a regular basis, start sponsoring women. And I thought, I picked the wrong sponsor because those solutions had nothing. She's speaking a foreign language. But I'll tell you, of course, when I got busy, I got better. And she knew that stuff was going to get me in the middle of the room and was going to put a foundation under me and a fellowship around me. 2 things that that to this day saved my life. And I've seen AA from the fringes and I've seen it from the middle, and the views are entirely different. And my experience is that when I'm in the middle of you, my life works, period. And I did that inventory she wanted me to do, and a big thing on that was I was ashamed of the fact that I only had an 8th grade education. I'm still waiting tables, and I felt really stuck. But now you're in speaker meetings in LA, and you're hearing people like Clint, I was living in a garage, now I'm a lawyer. And like, oh, that's great. I'll be a lawyer too one day. A few more meetings, and I'll be a lawyer. And Karen said, no, honey, God will adjust us what you can't do for yourself, and why don't you get your high school diploma, take the GED, get your GED. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I mean, 1, I know I can't pass. And 2, GED, how about a PhD, right? There's no middle ground for me. Big lesson, though, I learned the action doesn't care how contemptuous you are of it. It just mattered that I took it. I thought that was stupid and lame and had no bearing on my life. But once again, I was willing to try it someone else's way. And it wasn't until I had the letter in my hand from the state of California at 28 years old and 6 years sober, I haven't been a rocket to stardom here, saying, congratulations, you're a high school graduate. That's when I knew it mattered. But I'm not even willing to take that chance, right? I have this much perspective on my case. I need a sponsor that has a different perspective and that, that I trust. And, I started going to school because, class at a time, and I've been to 3 community colleges. I'm a great starter. I'm a terrible finisher. And guess where I learned how to finish? Right in the middle of my home group with those stupid commitments that I was supposed to take and keep. And eventually I transferred in June of 97. I put on a cap and gown. For the first time in my life, I was 33 and 11 years sober. And I got my first degree at UCLA, and I got to give that commencement address at that graduation. And my mom had her scholar back. She got to sit in the VIP section. And it was a long wait from 8th grade, but we took it. And then by now my sponsor was Marion, who also sponsored Joby. And my plan was to teach for a year and go to graduate school, and a friend of mine kept saying, we really need teachers, especially at middle school, LA Unified, and I'm like, no, God, where should I serve? What would you have me do? And she just kept coming back, and then I mentioned that job to Marion. Yeah, you don't have to go to Gardena, Marion. I have to go to Gardena. And Marion said, I think you could be of service there, and I think in your heart that's where you're supposed to be. And when she said that, I did know in my heart. But that's not the answer I wanted, right? When I'm praying for the fear to be removed, I mean make me not afraid. I don't mean to send me to 162nd Normandy with some big kid in my face and I'll pimp slap you, be like, that's not what I meant at all. But I took that job and I did that. And it was definitely tough, but it was really satisfying. But I still have my plan. So that next year I went up to Stanford and I got a master's, and I ended up on the faculty at the community college where I had a learning disability diagnosed, and where my sponsor Karen sent me to just take one class, and where I'd call her from the phone booth sometimes saying I'm too afraid to walk in, and I ended up teaching there. I thought that's what I wanted to do and why I got the fancy master's degree, but I found that my heart was really at 162nd Normandy, teaching special ed middle school, and that's the career that I just retired from and did for the last almost 30 years, and it also meant I needed more school, so that stupid GED turned into a bachelor's and a master's and 2 teaching credentials and a lot of debt that I just finished paying off 2 years ago at 60 years old. But I have to tell you, many times over these years, not every moment, for sure, not every day, not even every week, but many times, doing the work that I've done, I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to be anyone else. I feel comfortably and usefully whole. And for the chronically restless, irritable, and discontent, that's pretty good. Those pregnancies that I terminated through inventory, through the sacrament of confession, through a retreat through the Catholic Church called Rachel's Vineyard, obviously I've been able to walk with that. But I was 20 years sober before it occurred to me. I've worked with thousands of unwanted kids in the system. Kids, foster families don't want them there in group homes. Teachers certainly don't want them in their classrooms. Judges don't want them in their courtrooms. The kids that then end up with you at the probation camp. Lots of unwanted kids. And working with those unwanted kids has been a way for me to balance those scales with those unwanted pregnancies in a totally unexpected way, because there was no direct amends to be made there. And man, I could have missed that. If I would have said to my sponsor, okay, Marion, I'll teach, but not there, not that, not this. It looks so wrong. It looks so wrong to me. But I would much rather have God slide down on a star with a golden scroll saying, this is the path. But it doesn't, in my experience, and that's all I've got, it doesn't happen for me that way. It's my sponsor saying seemingly stupid things. I remember later, and my willingness to take it, that gift of surrender. I remember some years later asking Marion, how did you know that was the right thing? And she said, I didn't know, which is comforting, right? And as a sponsor, you really don't. But she said, I just know I didn't mean you any harm. And I think that when I'm surrendered and someone else is willing to serve, God is that third there, right? And remarkable things happen. I was single I had some long-term relationships, but a lot of old ideas about marriage, and let's be real, the very things that make me an effective special ed inner city middle school teacher make me rather unapproachable for dating. had kind of a, a walled off heart. And I just thought that ship had sailed. Like I said, I had some long-term relationships, but lots of periods single. And then I met Mike, and Mike walked off of Skid Row at 53 years old, Skid Row in LA, and walked into the Midnight Mission, and having done Social Security statement at 32 years of zero, so that gives you an idea. Done close to 30 years in the penitentiary, and he started working for Clancy on his second day in the mission, became a very well-respected, well-loved member of our home group, and I was not his equal, and those that know us both know that that's so, but thank God that love makes allowances. He's an extraordinary man, and we started dating when he had 6 years, and we fell in love, and I just couldn't believe, like what Jack and Leslie had to have, that this extraordinary thing came along. I had seen it before, but I didn't think it was for me. And guy like that, having done that much time and at that age, and should not have gotten sober, but that happened. And a woman like me, stay away, defended heart, should not have fallen head over heels out loud in love with this man. But those two improbable things happened, and we got engaged, and we bought a house right on the Pasadena-Altadena line, and within about a month of being, this is a sad story, within about a month of being in the house, it was clear that Mike was sick, and he had terrible health insurance and blah, blah, blah. And we ended up, finally we got some scans, and we knew it wasn't good. We were in the hospital for a week. We tried to get second opinions. We came home. Our house was full of bed bugs. We had to move out. A member of our home group, Alan, who's down in McMinnville, and we'll see him later, he put us up in a hotel while we tented the houses, and I'm carrying around this bag of medical records and calling in my sub-plans, and Mike is suffering, and eventually we got back in the house about a week later, and got approved to go to City of Hope, World Renowned Cancer Hospital, 10 miles down the road, like, oh, they'll fix it. Great, that was just a bump in the road. And within the first 10 minutes of our first visit, and he had extraordinary care there. He had 9 doctors, and but they don't mince words, and they said, you have 6 to 10 months, and we got 10 months. And I remember thinking, that is not how this goes. I'm the high school dropout that went to Stanford. That's the trajectory. That is not how this is gonna go. And the serenity prayer is great for stuff like traffic, right? But what about stuff that's unacceptable? Don't talk to me about about acceptance and a day at a time. Actually, those are the heavy hitters, it turns out, in a time like that. But you know what happens if you've been around here and in the middle. In Alcoholics Anonymous, sorrow doesn't come alone, it comes with all of you. And, Laura's husband on a Sunday, who knows how, showed up with a hospital bed, our house filled up with people, took out our old bed bug couch and brought that in, and we were already engaged, and so we wanted to be married with whatever time that we had left, and our home group put on a wedding for us in Clancy's backyard, and I don't know, 300 or 400 people were there, and for 269 days, I was married to Mike, and his best friend Lewis started a meeting in our driveway, and I have never known fear like that. And I've been through a few things, and the thing that would take it away was you. Liver cancer is a brutal taskmaster. But so is alcoholism, and Mike and I both had it bad, and that needed to be treated too. And I would, 20, 30, 40 of you would come up our driveway every Thursday night, and I would feel myself, filling up again and getting that strength again, and to walk through that. And he passed away in our home, the only house he ever had. He was an LA guy, so it was like apartments and projects and cells, and he loved that house, and he wanted to die there, and we made sure. And Laura was one of the people that helped with that cut. She was going to school and a mom and nursing, and she would, when I'd have to go to work, she'd come and take over and figure out the medication list, and God, it was just all so terrifying. And, I mean, I can barely do a bloody nose at school, but you know, you taught me whatever it was, I would show up and somebody would, and, yeah, and there was a lot of grief to navigate, and you know, I was in a grief group for 2.5 years, and I read a lot of books, and you know, and I could look around my home group, and thank God that we don't just come when times are good, right? I could see people who had lost spouses, and the worst loss of all, children, and think, well, okay, you know, they breathe in and out, they laugh sometimes, I can do this too, right? And you know, what you learn, of course, is there's plenty of room for the anguish, but also the joy, also laughter, also. There was not a single day, not one day in that time, that Mike and I did not turn and look at each other and just be astounded by just filled with gratitude, because somebody would, you know, leave a bag of groceries on our porch, or just all those many things that were so sustaining. The day that Charles came out with Cheryl and him's daughter, and you know, said goodbye to Mike, and just those kind of things that just really keep you going. And in January of 25, that house, that neighborhood that you know, our neighborhood burned down in the Eaton fire. Not our house all the way, but part of it. And I'm still not back in the house, and that's been rough. That kind of erasure, you know, the whole community, 22 square miles of just, you know, 18 members of my community there died, and everything, the whole known landscape of your daily life. I know you know that, Lisa, from Paradise. You know, your bank and your post office and the hardware store, and just that collective trauma and grief and sorrow and fear, and you're just kind of swimming in that. And that's, you know, this is the story. It'd be nice to have a happy ending, and there's plenty of good news though. But that's what's been going on, you know, this last year and a half, and I'm very close to getting back in my house. Everything across the street is gone, and you know, I want to cling to that. I want it all back. You know, I want this 1920s, 1930s beautiful community. I want it back. I want it made whole, and it's not coming back. And again, that's you know, it's a hard thing to accept, but accept I must. And Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that I have to fit myself to the world, and I can't demand that the world fit itself to me. That is just how it is. And you not only have taught me that, you have showed me that. You know, you have showed me that and continue to show me that. I think I mentioned I retired, and that's exciting. I'm starting off on this, you know, great new chapter of traveling and visiting friends and doing things like that, and plenty of time to get settled in my house again once it's repaired. And you know, it's not the life I thought that it would look like, a dead husband in a burned down neighborhood, but it's the life I've got. It's the life I've got, and it's certainly better than the one that I brought here, and I'll take it. You know, I'll take it. There's an Irish poet, Patrick O'Toole, and there's a line in one of his poems about, so let's take the stones that we stumble over and build altars. And isn't that what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous? These very things that are never going to see the light of day, our worst secrets, our biggest sorrows, right? They're here, and they become a place where somebody else can heal. Someone else can take up their bed and walk again, you know? I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in the Bible Belt, but I've been thinking of this line, and no disrespect, you know, just this biblical line from Jeremiah. And how does it go? And in this place of which you say it is a waste, there once again will be the sounds of mirth and the sounds of gladness. And that too is a beautiful definition of Alcoholics Anonymous. The most lost, and we really are the island of misfit toys, you know? Coming in here devastated, clawing ourselves out of the grave that alcoholism has dug for us. And yet, you know, the mirth, the laughter, the gladness, the joy, even in hard times, it's all here for the taking. Something else that I love that I think also defines A, and that's it. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole world. And if you're new and wondering what's going on here, You don't owe us anything. We don't want anything from you. Don't worry. I was worried about that, as if I had anything anyone would want. We would love for you to find what we found here. It's yours for the taking. There are tools here. We'll show you how to pick them up and use them. It's here if you'll have it. So, my life is good in spite of all that, and I'm excited for what's to come. And I want to thank you guys for taking this ride with me tonight, for being so present with me. I want to thank you for who you've been all the days leading up to this one and all the days to come, because I'll certainly need you. And thank you for my life.